Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The U.S. has reportedly lifted license suspensions for GE Aerospace to ship jet engines to China, in a sign of possible de-escalation in trade tensions. Other U.S. restrictions that have been removed this week include chip design software. Officials in Beijing were informed of the situation and urged the U.S. to continue to move in the same direction as China. Danny Zhou tells us more.
Sources say the U.S. Department of Commerce has allowed the Ohio-headquartered GE Aerospace to resume jet engine shipments to Chinese playmaker Comac, lifting a suspension issued several weeks ago. The licenses affect two engines for China's first homegrown passenger aircraft C919, as well as the C909 jet. At least one more U.S. aerospace manufacturer was granted approval to resume exports to China, according to media reports. In other sectors, the U.S. government sent letters on Wednesday to major ethane producers in the country to rescind a restrictive license requirement on exports to China. This as three of the world's largest developers of electronic design automation software, Synopsys, Cadence Design Systems, and Siemens, received U.S. notice to restore access of their chip design software for Chinese customers. The restrictions were part of the many countermeasures ordered by Washington in response to Beijing's export curbs on rare earth minerals and related magnets. According to Reuters, more restrictions are expected to be eased that would dial back the Sino-US trade to February and March levels. Beijing has renewed its call on the U.S. to work in the same direction as China. The Foreign Ministry said Washington should take concrete action to uphold and implement the important consensus reached by the two heads of state and jointly promote the sound development of economic and trade relations. The Ministry of Commerce noted it has been informed by Washington about the latest situation and that both parties are speeding up implementation of the framework agreement following trade talks in London. It announced China is reviewing and approving applications for exports of controlled items, while the U.S. would also cancel restrictive measures against China. Urging Washington to further correct its erroneous practices, the ministry stressed that dialogue and cooperation are the right path forward, and threats and coercion lead nowhere. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
The Ministry of Commerce announced it will impose anti-dumping measures on brandy imports from the European Union for a period of 5 years starting tomorrow. The decision comes after the final ruling of a Beijing probe that found brandy imported from the EU involves dumping. China said it poses an actual threat of damage to its domestic brandy industry. According to the Commerce Ministry, the final ruling determined dumping margins ranging from 27.7% to 34.9%. The anti-dumping duties came after the EU undertook a probe into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies. The standby signal number 1 is in force. This means that a tropical cyclone now centered within about 800 kilometers of Hong Kong may affect its city. At 6 p.m., the tropical depression over the northeastern part of the South China Sea was estimated to be about 540 kilometers east-southeast of Hong Kong, and is forecast to move northwest or west-northwest slowly, lingering over the northeastern part of the South China Sea and intensifying gradually. More military models were displayed on aircraft carrier Shandong on the second day of the Chinese Naval Fleet's visit to Hong Kong. The Musinghai reports.
Apart from new fighter jet models J-15T, multiple Harbin Sat-9 and Changhe Sat-18 were showcased on the deck of the carrier. During the carrier's visit, Navy officers can also take part in cultural activities. This Navy colonel said he's a fan of TVB News and has watched the channel for many years. Meanwhile, more than 100 secondary school students visited the warship on the second day. The students held a massive national flag and sang "My Mother and I." Some students said they are excited, with one saying they will consider joining the army when they grow up. In the afternoon, a military talk was hosted for students at the Onshunzhao Naval Base. The talk hopes to share the naval fleet's daily work and its operational experiences. News 9, TVB News.
The government has proposed a legal framework for a registration system for same-sex civil partnerships in response to a Court of Final Appeal ruling. But the proposal has been met with objections from major political parties. The contention began from a judicial review over whether same-sex couples have the constitutional right to marriage. In 2023, the Court of Final Appeal ruled that the basic law only guarantees marriage between a man and a woman, but the court found the government had failed to fulfill its obligation to provide an alternative legal framework for same-sex relationships and ordered the government to iron out the framework by October. 3 months ahead of the deadline, the government proposed a civil partnership registration scheme that would grant same-sex couples rights related to medical decisions and end-of-life arrangements. However, the proposal was met with strong opposition during LegCo debates. Legal academic and lawmaker Priscilla Leung argues the judiciary should not dictate the actions of the executive and legislative branches. Leung said marriage-related rights involve major policy-making decisions, so it should be up to the government to decide whether or not and when to introduce changes. She also questions whether the society is ready for the change. She said it should not be a few judges who impose a timetable requiring the government or the legislature to act within 2 years. Senior Counsel and Executive Council member Ronnie Tong meanwhile said even if the bill is disapproved by LegCo, the situation reflects the checks and balances among the city's 3 branches of power. Tong says the court ruling requires the government to propose a framework within 2 years, but the court cannot force LegCo to pass it within that time frame. Urging lawmakers not to overreact, Tong adds that the registration mechanism is merely a support framework to help these individuals better integrate into society, and it does not affect marital status, asset arrangements, or even taxation. On that, Priscilla Leung expressed concerns that establishing a same-sex partnership system could undermine the principle of monogamy. A Japanese comic artist had earlier predicted that a major earthquake will strike Japan on July 5th without any scientific evidence. But the so-called prediction has sparked concern and, for some, panic buying. At this department store in Tokyo, shelves stocking emergency kits and disaster gear are almost emptied. For thermal blankets, only one item is left. Also snapped up are popular emergency meals like beef rice and fried rice. At another store, supplies appear unaffected. While some Japanese citizens express worries, others say no one can predict the future. The rumors originated from a Japanese comic that went viral on Chinese social media. The Hong Kong Observatory, meanwhile, knows it's very hard to accurately and scientifically forecast earthquakes in advance. Welcome back. Russia launched its largest aerial attack on Kyiv overnight since its war on Ukraine began. This as Russian leader Vladimir Putin told U.S. President Donald Trump in a phone call that Moscow would achieve its goals in the conflict. Tracy Furness reports.
Explosions heard again overnight in Ukraine's capital Kyiv as Russia launched 550 drones and missiles. Russia's Air Force said the majority were Shahed drones, with 11 missiles fired. The attack came hours after US President Donald Trump held a call with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, when Trump reiterated his proposal for a swift ceasefire in Ukraine. Putin said Russia insists on resolving the conflict through political negotiations and updated Trump on the second round of direct talks between Russia and Ukraine. The US president also made his first public comments in the call on the US decision to pause some shipments of weapons to Ukraine, which includes munitions such as Patriot missiles, the AIM-7 Sparrow air-to-air missile and shorter-range Stinger missiles. They are needed to counter incoming missiles and drones and to bring down Russian aircraft.
We're giving weapons, but we've given so many weapons, but we are giving weapons, and we're working with them and trying to help them, but we haven't. You know, Biden emptied out our whole country giving them weapons, and we have to make sure that we have enough for ourselves.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited one of the worst-hit communities during the October 7, 2023 attacks by Palestinian groups that triggered the Gaza war. Nasfi Karim with more.
After 21 months of war, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu makes his first wartime visit to Kibbutz Nir Oz, one of the hardest-hit communities in the October 7, 2023 attacks by Palestinian groups led by Hamas. There he met Gadi Moses, an 81-year-old former hostage who was released in January. Mr. Prime Minister, there is not much time, Moses told Netanyahu, who reassured him that the campaign in Gaza will succeed. As smoke rose from nearby Gaza after another Israeli airstrike, not everyone was happy to see the Israeli leader. A group of protesters gathered outside the gate of the kibbutz, one shouting in Hebrew, "Zero, that's who you are. Isn't it time that you get out of our lives?" They blamed Netanyahu for the attack that resulted in 1,200 deaths and the taking of more than 250 hostages, of which 50 remain in captivity, around 20 of them still alive.
If I were from Nir Oz, I wouldn't invite him. I think, as far as I know, that Kibbutz Be'eri didn't invite him because he didn't take any responsibility of what he did. And we think that someone that we think is blamed for what happened, he should go home.
Netanyahu's visit comes ahead of his trip on Monday to the White House, where he's expected to meet U.S. President Donald Trump. The two leaders will discuss a U.S. ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas. Before boarding Air Force One, Trump was asked if he still wanted the U.S. to take over Gaza.
I want the people of Gaza to be safe, more importantly. I want to see safety for the people of Gaza. They've gone through hell. Thank you very much, everyone.
Trump also met with the former Gaza hostage. Edan Alexander, an American-born Israeli soldier, was at the White House on Thursday to meet Trump. Meanwhile, more than 90 Palestinians were killed in Gaza overnight and into Thursday, including 45 seeking humanitarian aid. This as the United Nations expressed deep concern about the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. The UN is prevented from sending aid into the enclave, with the US-backed private group distributing supplies at certain sites. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi has left Belgium and has held talks with leaders in Germany in the second stop of his diplomatic tour of Europe. Danny Zhou reports.
After concluding the 8th round of the China-Germany strategic dialogue on diplomacy and security, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his German counterpart Johann Wadephul held a joint press conference. Wadephul noted that restrictions on rare earths have caused concerns and that Germany is on a path to finding sustainable joint solutions with China. When Wang was asked on whether a deal could be reached ahead of the EU-China summit, he said it's China's sovereign right to impose necessary regulations on rare earth minerals, which he says are dual-use goods. China's policy is in line with international practice, he said. Wang also expressed dissatisfaction over the hyping up of rare earths as a problem in China-Europe relations. He highlighted that as long as normal export control regulations are followed and the procedures are completed, the normal demands of German and European companies will be met. Wang added that China and Germany, as the world's second and third largest economies, should deepen cooperation while playing advocates for free trade. Meanwhile, he dismissed the negative voices towards China within the European business sector. Wang said the positioning of China and Europe should be one of partners. Wang is expected to hold a meeting with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz during his stay in Berlin. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
2 drivers have been arrested after a suspected hit-and-run incident in Kennedy Town. A 76-year-old female pedestrian was seriously injured at around 10 a.m. at the intersection of North Street and Belcher Street. According to the police, the woman was first hit by a truck before being struck by a car. A third vehicle stopped in time to avoid hitting her. The woman suffered multiple injuries and was sent to Queen Mary Hospital. The suspects have been arrested. The University of Hong Kong said its Bachelor of Science in Surveying program involving different disciplines has received a new accreditation. The recognition is in the area of land surveying. The Musingai reports.
The University of Hong Kong says it has a world's first. Its Bachelor of Science in Surveying program is the only course in the field that has obtained full recognition in 6 disciplines. Apart from land surveying, the university earlier received accreditation in areas including general practice and building surveying. Speaking to the media on Friday, HKU's Department of Real Estate and Construction said the 4-year program will allow students to gain multidisciplinary skills.
One example that I can think of is traditionally geospatial mapping, geospatial analysis is considered as like the jurisdiction of land surveyors, right? But these days, because of the advance of these technologies, this technique is more widely adopted and needed by different disciplines.
We're very optimistic about the future demand for surveyors because of the development of the law of metropolis. And also, we can see that there will be an increase in the amount of population mainly driven by important talents from other places and also increase in student numbers. So we did a lot of housing and infrastructure.
The department says it has so far received up to 8 overseas students' inquiries about the program, with some from the mainland and Southeast Asia expressing interest. Memos 9, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thank you for watching.